Where is there a problem with us sort of encouraging this stoic attitude or stoicism? Where's the problem, Will?
Well, so appropriating some elements of Stoicism into a Christian mindset is probably okay. In fact, we can see some at least points of comparison or overlap between Stoicism and Christianity. In fact, I think as Lutherans in particular, I think we're often accused of being one of the more Stoic denominations of Christianity, especially compared to most other Protestant denominations in the West.
Yeah, I've commented on that when I'm about to make a joke from the pulpit and say, okay, it is okay to laugh.
Yeah, right.
You know,
We're
yeah,
perceived as kind of these unfeeling, detached Christians, and
rational.
yeah, and in some sense, there might be some truth to that. So a few months ago, we talked to Dr. Jean Edward Veith, and we talked a bit about his spirituality of the cross. And in that book, he talked about this idea that the spirituality of the cross contrasted with the spirituality of glory. This idea that for us Lutherans, we find joy and contentment regardless of what our station is in this life, right?
That sounds like stoicism.
It does sound like Stoicism.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so like gives an example in the book about like a cancer patient and how two people might approach that situation. You have some Christians who go into that situation and think, my happiness is dependent upon some sort of external change. I'm going to pray and have faith that God will take this illness away from me. And my happiness is more or less dependent upon whether or not he does that. And that's kind of like the theology of glory, right? The
Yeah,
spirituality
yeah.
of glory. Whereas the spirituality of the cross that Dr. Veith was getting at is saying, okay, I'm going through suffering right now. I don't like this. This is hard, but it's more about recognizing that God is sovereign over all of it and that he has our best good in mind, regardless of what we're going through. So, kind of like with Stoicism, it's not so much about changing the outward or the external circumstances. It's more, coming to grips with your station in life and giving God the glory through all of it and recognizing that he knows what's best for you and you don't.
So
And
some, go ahead.
that's kind of a stoic notion in a way. There's some overlap there.
Right. So you could say that at some level, both Stoics and Christians say, I can't control the world, but I can control myself at some level.
Yeah,
Christians not so much, but I think there's a could we say that the Stoics seek to control themselves in order to gain contentment, while the Christians have that contentment which feeds their attitude and behavior?
that's a great way of putting it.
Okay.
The means and the ends are kind of reversed between the Stoics and the Christians. So the Stoics, the means to ultimate happiness is the Stoicism, that sort of detachment. That's what you have to do in order to achieve that ultimate happiness. Whereas for the Christian, we have that sort of ultimate happiness already in what Christ has done for us on the cross. And that's ultimately our source of joy. And that sort of ultimate fulfillment that we already have gives us this sort of stoic attitude, for lack of a better word, that we can be happy regardless of whatever our circumstances are in this life because of what Christ has done for us on the cross.
Right. Through Christ, we have everything.
Right.
We have forgiveness of sins. We have the hope of a blessed eternity. We have fellowship with other believers. That brings us contentment,
Right.
which allows us to live out our lives in a way that our lives aren't destroyed by what may happen to us,
Right.
because our lives are rooted in Christ.
Right.
Where for
Right.
the people trying to find contentment or purpose through their behavior and then seeing the result of their own actions, it's always tenuous and nebulous and never really works out the way they want it to.
Right. Go back to
Okay.
the cancer patient example.
Right.
So a stoic who has cancer will say, okay, my sadness over my situation comes from my being overly attached to my own life. being overly attached to the goods in the world. And so my happiness is dependent upon my ability to detach myself from these earthly goods. And doing that, I will be happy. Whereas the Christian cancer patient will say, I know that God has my best interest in mind, even in my suffering. He uses our suffering for our own good, right? And anything that I experience in this life is going to pale in comparison to the joy I'll have in eternity and the life after. And so